Welcome back. A day of reckoning for Raila Odinga, who has been touted as the bastion and a stabilizing figure when it came to steamrolling democracy in this country, that he was there in the trenches, right, making sure that we are, as a country, being pulled out from the barnacles of the single-party rule to multi-party democracy. And today also is a milestone for his journey, and this is an attempt that he is making, right, the fifth stab at the presidency. Will he make it or not? Would this also be a sink or swim scenario for Raila Odinga? Azimio la Umoja Convention, that is a national convention, is happening at Kasarani, and as I mentioned earlier, we were bringing pictures live from Kasarani. Our reporter is on the ground, Duncan Hayemba, who is doggedly following the current state of play in Kasarani. We shall be crossing over to him momentarily, but in the meantime also I'm holding court with Professor Eric Eseka, who is a professor of leadership and governance at the Africa International University. Also I'm holding court with me Professor Noah Midamba, who is the former Vice Chancellor of KCA University, also a foreign and defense policy expert. And we're trying to slice and dice, look at the life of Raila Odinga, his stab from a tender age, youthful age, when he, of course, got into the phrase of politics, and how he has gone through various dispensations and epochs of time to be who he is today, that we can acknowledge him as a statesman, that he has brought sobriety and sanity even to politics, being also a very critical opposition leader in trying to put the government in their place, paint them in their corner when it came to issues of governance and corruption in this country. Along the way, there was a handshake, and things also dramatically changed with that particular handshake, right? And he says, according to himself, that this was very pivotal in terms of bringing sanity also to our political culture, but that by then was really frayed and strained because of different political ideologies and differences also, especially with the contentious 2017 election. We are looking at a leader and what really makes a good leader vis-a-vis to what is happening today, and that's why we're having this conversation. The subject is In Search of a Leader. Professor Eseka, you've not really lost your track of thought, have you? You can continue. I think we were on the social welfare still. Yes.
The issue of leadership in our country must be value-based, and those are values that must be enforced. And I was introducing a tool called TAPI that has these principles of transparency, accountability, prevention, enforcement, as well as education. The importance of transparency is to ingrain the question of disclosure, whereby there is information flow, because where there's unbalanced information, what we call asymmetry of information, you have a lot of malfeasance behind that asymmetry. And that happens a lot in Kenya. So a lot of the corruption we talk about is really because of existing asymmetries. Secondly, the principle of accountability is very critical. And that is speaking to two critical elements. Number one, responsibility, and number two, what we can call answerability. And when people have a sense of responsibility and answerability, it will solve a serious Kenyan problem of impunity. So when you make institutions TAPI compliant, and individuals operating in those institutions, therefore, are required to observe that impunity will cease. Thirdly, prevention. And fourthly, enforcement. Those two are critical for purposes of enforcing and bring about a regulatory environment whereby there are interventions that can correct any anomaly that seems to be cropping up. That is, again, an area whereby we are too late. We do post-mortem kind of entries instead of putting in place preventive mechanisms and as well as enforcing. And then lastly, the issue of education. Education is meant to conscientize people with a view of creating a civic culture in the citizens and leaders. The level of civility in our country is very low. And so there's need for us to devise strategies and ways that we can develop the necessary civic culture in our country. Now, this brings me to the second issue that you pointed out. That is the whole question of social welfare. Social welfare, of course, with the pronouncements that we have been given, are leaning towards doling out monies. And this doling out is what in political history we call distribution of largesse. Distribution of largesse is not the way to solve problems. What we need to do is to empower the people so that that money should be looked at in terms of providing seed, providing the necessary capital for these people to be helped to start generating projects. Otherwise, if it's just doling out, what you are creating is a syndrome of dependency, which is injurious to the nation. So people need to be empowered so that they can begin investing, so that they can begin to develop a spirit and practice of entrepreneurship. That is what will make a difference. But just giving people because they have no food, of course they'll eat it and be dependent, and they'll always have their hands stretched out. That's a problem.
Right. Nomi Damba, I know you really want to be apolitical, but I want also to just bring you on the rails a bit and ask you, just looking at the milestones also, as I was talking and saying, yes, Raila has been, a stabilizing figure when it came to steamrolling democracy in this particular country, from where he started, being in the slumbers for the longest time. Today is a pivotal day for him, given his age as well. He's said, I will only rule for this one term, then I'm done if I get the presidency, as it were. But how then do we credit Raila Odinga to this moment, even with the handshake? Many people say maybe he lost the plot with the handshake. Maybe this was his undoing politically. He lost sort of, that political vigor and capital that we had. Was this a very pivotal, or was it a smart move that he made with the handshake? Or this also was his door now to political obscurity? And will today also be a day that will salvage that? How then do we move forward?
Dubal, this is a real paramount and fundamental question, particularly for Raila. Kenya knows Raila's record. Kenya knows Raila's, from his father to Raila, the role they played in mobilizing the country, awareness of issues of corruption, insecurity, and all that. And he suffered for it. Raila went to jail for a significant period of time. His family was subjected to really inhumane situation. And is now coming around to do two things, very, very important for the country. Deal with corruption as number one enemy of this country. And secondly, bring Kenyans together. Forget all the four pillars, forget all the agenda we have put together, forget Vision 2030. If we are able to do those two things, and this is where I would like to all the supporters of Raila's and everybody who are to listen very carefully. If he's able to do those two things, or at least move us in a positive way, in some sense that we are now on the right course to deal with corruption, and then bring Kenyans together so that they can feel this is government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And if he's able to do that, Dubal, and I hope so, because he's mature politically, he has a sense of where the country is and what people need. And he has indicated that he wants to have one term, and that one time he will give everything that he can. So I think Kenyans need to retreat back and say, well, this is the time for you. But here are the following things that we are expecting from you. The most important thing, remember, and I agree very much with my friend here, Professor Seka. A nation state is a conglomerate of interest. We have ethnic groups that have specific interest. We have churches, groups that are, mosque, whatever, they have interest. How will you, as a person, be able to harmonize those interests and yet focus on the bigger picture of the country? And I think with all the experience Raila has had, with all his dealing with his background and everything, here's his time to reflect for Kenya that yes, I have matured, yes, I understand you, yes, this is where we need to go. Let me give you one or two examples, Debao. The least corrupt country are the ones that are more transparent and accountable. And I can talk about Denmark, New Zealand, Finland, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, Netherlands, Germany, Luxembourg. These are the most open country and the most progressive there is. The more the close there is, the more the country is corrupt, the least they're open and the least they're accountable. And in this place, you find South Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, Sudan, Equatorial Guinea, Libya, North Korea, and Haiti. Now, so you understand the framework that I'm trying to project here. Where do we want to go? We want to be more open. We want our citizens to own this government. We want people to say, I can take my child to school anywhere in the country. And I have opportunity, these young people who are coming to college, I have opportunity to be anything. Barack Obama became president of the United States. It was nobody. It was no Trump and Trump background. Can you do that? And so during our expectations are high for Raila. But he must be able to put together a team of people that can help him achieve that goal that we're talking about. Because Kenya is yawning. It is now over 60 years of independence. We can no longer go back and blame the British and colonial everything. It's ourselves now who's in charge. And my expectation is rather high for him to perform well and bring us to the next level of our development.
Well, Professor.
Thank you. I have three observations about the handshake and the aftermath of the handshake. Number one, coming out of a highly conflictual situation that became a threat to the national security of the country, I think the handshake reflects a good element of statesmanship in Raila. That he demonstrated a quality of political tolerance to be able to impress your opponent and sit and talk with a view to looking at the nation instead of looking at the personal position. Number two is that he demonstrated that he is flexible and can be adaptable, which are good qualities in a good leader. So for that reason, you see, he was able to persuade a significant percentage of Mount Kenya community people that he is not the Raila whom they thought about, that he is interested in national cohesion and stability, and they, particularly who have a stake in agriculture and business, had and better understand and work with the enabling environment that the handshake created. Without that handshake, Raila would not have had the kind of percentage of support that is having in central Kenya. That is very significant. Number two is that the whole issue of handshake brought about tranquility and therefore the realization of stability that has generated goodwill for Raila. And you see, George Bush introduced a term called political capital. And so this act, in a way, has raised the political capital of Raila among certain communities. And when you're talking about political capital, the key elements of political capital are, one, goodwill, and number two, legitimacy. And so if you can do an act that will raise your political capital among citizens, then that is something that is commendable. That's a sense in which I can look at the handshake. Thirdly, the whole issue of the creation of national understanding and fostering of harmony. That is critical. The fostering of harmony, the establishment of norms, which they sought to really mainstream through building Bridges Initiative, looking at what makes Kenyans fight and trying to bring in norms and practices that will make that be a thing of the past. That is important in the sense that he was raising stocks of social capital. You know, social capital in terms of networks which have expanded, right? Relationships that are cordial, values and norms basically play the role of creating an enabling environment.
Right.
And so,
which orients also my thought towards what you're saying when you talk about norms, that also with the handshake, there was a different political socialization.
yeah.
Yeah. But in this country, when we talk about political socialization, we are lacking in the norms. I don't know if you may expand on that political socialization. Do you think it is gravitating the country towards, because right now people are saying we don't have a very active opposition. Who will hold the government accountable? We don't know. He was very feisty, he was very vocal, and he was keeping the government, you know, on toes. Transparency was something that, as you said, was not really very forthcoming during those, even the tenure of, during the tenure of President Uhuru Kenyatta. But Raila kept them in check as well. Talk about political socialization a bit before we go to Naomi Ndama.
Yes, you know, this requires one to have a sense of creating a balance. Prior to the handshake, he was on the other extreme that was causing destabilization and was bound to bring about an anarchic situation, which Emile Durkheim will call anomy, when things are breaking down. You cannot build a nation when systems are breaking down. Now, he moved and he's perceived to have gone to the other side, right, whereby it appears like the opposition died. And I think it has been said that he became the de facto deputy president, and the deputy president became the opposition leader. So what is needed of him, he needed to strike a balance so that he retains his role as a playing what we call responsible opposition.
Thank you.
Which should not be characterized by dissidence and opposing for the sake of opposing.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yes.
Allow me to cross over to Kasarani, because we can see, yes, pomp and